You can probably hear them down there, the sounds of joy, which is a nice sound. They're celebrating making it through the Bible, the whole curriculum from cover to cover. So Natalie bought a bunch of things to help them celebrate, and they're doing that now, which is really cool. So in a few weeks, Brent is going to switch out with me. He's going to be teaching the adult class. And so we're done with our follow through with the kids' studies. So for the next 3 weeks, I was trying to figure out something to do just very short term. And you guys know me, and you know my love for 4 weeks. All right, good deal. That's good to know. I don't even know what day of the week it is anymore. I'm like in full survival mode. So 4 weeks. And I wanted to start, I don't know how far we'll get today, but we have 4 weeks to cover it. 4 weeks, Jimmy, get it, 4 weeks. I got to remind myself. In 3 weeks, I'm going to be like, where's Brent? So I like all things Thom Rainer. Thom Rainer, in my opinion, is probably the most accurate church statistician, and really has a good finger on the pulse of what's going on in the church, just generally in the United States. And so him and his team of people, of statisticians, do countless surveys, and Tom's written countless books, and every one of them I think is just so good. And so there are a couple blogs that I want to read, because I like to think about and talk about the future of the church. Like, where are we going? And I love history. I love church history. I love restoration history. And so I'm like a history nerd when it comes to church history. And I think that's really important. I think it's vital to know what's happened in the past so that we understand what kind of moves us in the present. But with all of that said, I think it's really important to kind of know where the church is headed to the best of our ability. Of course, we're not prophets, but you can get general glimpses of where we're headed. And that's true for all kinds of different areas. If you think about the economy, we don't really know what's going to happen with the economy in the U.S., but we have a pretty good idea. We have some indicators of where we're going. We've got some music. We have some indications for where the economy is going. What's going off? I'm going to throw the book bag in the baptistry. There it goes. See, that's why I turned my ringer off. So we kind of can get a general idea of where things are going. And the same is true for church. So this was written, I want to say this one, there are two different blogs that we're going to look at. These are recent blogs, I think. Yeah, this is Thom Rainer, Tom's son. And the title is The Gritty Work of Church Revitalization, an Unglamorous Calling for the Glory of God. And this is, the idea is that if we really want to, if we want to understand where the churches are going, we're going to get back to the grind. We're going to get away from all of the glamour and everything that was this attractional church method that I think really started gaining popularity in the 90s. And that's the invite people. If you build it, they will come. Like, invite people to church, and they're going to have this wow experience. We're going to just like knock the socks off of them by having the most structured, organized church service that they've ever experienced. They'll experience God. God will descend on this worship encampment, this worship experience, and it's a high church model. So it puts a lot of a high view of church, a high view of worship, which I'm actually all for. I wish that we had a higher view of worship and the importance of our worship that we give God on Sunday mornings when we gather. With that said, when you have a high church model, sometimes you have a low evangelism model. And so you have this high view of worship, but this lower view of evangelism. And so Sam is saying that to revitalize the church, we have to adopt this unglamorous calling for the glory of God, which means we just have to grind and we have to work. And it's very unglamorous. And I always, I know I've said this 100 times, but I always think of Bill Riggs, because on multiple occasions he said, I believe, he's like, after reading the scripture from cover to cover, I've read the Bible cover to cover every year for I forget how many decades. He said, I've come to the conclusion that as Christians, our lot in life is to just grit our teeth, roll up our sleeves, and do the dirty work until we die. And I love that Bill not only said it, but he did it. He modeled that. He exemplified what it was to just get to the grind. And DP, like we laugh about, DP got to experience Bill out in the mission field in Ecuador, and he absolutely loathed painting. And so the one thing, of course, that Bill volunteers to do, he was a glutton for punishment, was painting. Going to a house and they were doing paint work, and he just was like literally gritting his teeth, and he was like, I hate painting. But he did it. And, the end result was families were really helped out who are in deep need. And so that's what this article by Sam is about. So I'm going to read some of it with you guys. Ministry isn't glamorous. And the moment that ministry does become glamorous, you become an anti-minister. Do you guys agree with that statement? I do too. You become an anti-minister when church work becomes glamorous. Church revitalization is gritty work, but God is glorified in the impossible challenge of leading a church back to health. The church's biggest problem is not a lack of giving, a lack of people, or a lack of leadership. The church's biggest problem is the lack of assurance in pursuing God's glory. Slow giving trends are a symptom of a greater problem. The decline in average worship attendance is a symptom of a greater problem. Poor leadership is a symptom of a greater problem. The solution to the church's problem is a tireless pursuit of God's glory. Here's where I disagree a little bit, and I think it's okay to kind of challenge these things too. I think in our case, a decrease in giving is not a symptom of a bigger problem. It's at least with the church itself, it's a symptom of who you're ministering to. Like if you look at the people who followed Jesus, I don't think Jesus had all these great big, people who are given massive amounts of money, because the people who flocked to Jesus were people who are living in extreme poverty. And so I don't think there was this great big bankroll. Like you certainly don't see that with Jesus. In fact, he told his own disciples, when you go out, don't take anything extra. Just take what's on your back, the shirt's on your back. Don't take an extra staff. Don't take an extra money bag. Don't take extra food. Just go out and serve people. Get to the grind. And so I think often we focus so much on church budgets that we're missing a bigger picture, and that is Sam's whole point here, is that ministry is just about getting to the grind. It's about serving people and helping people when they're in need. Glory implies weight, something substantial or lasting. To glory in something is to show it is central and most important. Nothing should equal the weight of God in your life. Every great leader dies. Ethics deteriorate, economies putter out, the best buildings crumble, the highest rated schools phase in and out, the biggest churches come and go. Only the glory of God carries with it the weight of blessed assurance. And I will amen that from the rooftops. We don't just recruit people to come to church on the weekend. We compel people to become active participants in the most incredible mission this world has ever known, the proclamation of the glory of God to the ends of the earth. Why do we exist? The only way it matters is if our life's mission is bringing glory to God. Again, I will amen that. Okay, so this article is just about, it's gritty work. You got to get to the grind, you got to do the work, put the work in, and God is going to bless that. And then this article was written by his dad, Thom, and it's called The Future Work in Church, 10 Realities You Might Not Know. And I thought this was really good. He starts off, AI, robotics, work from everywhere, the disappearing middle manager, the stress of blue-collar and service workers, gigs and side gigs. The headlines state the obvious, work is changing. The pandemic accelerated the change. Workers are adjusting, companies are adjusting, the marketplace is adjusting. I'm concerned, however, that most churches are not adjusting. Would you agree with that statement? Yeah, no? Charles shakes his head. I agree with it as well. I think churches are having a difficult time adjusting, and I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not good or bad. It's just that we're a changing culture that's changing at breakneck speed.
The one thing that I commend our congregation for, when the governor signed that bill that said no more than 10 people here at church, we went ahead and immediately started the online services.
Sure, yeah. We adapted really quickly.
And that's why it was a success here. Now,
Yeah.
attendance is still small now, but that will grow.
Yeah, the other thing too, I mean, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but I guess there's no real particular order in my life anywhere, so that fits my personality. But I was thinking about this, like, we went out to the Schaefer's yesterday, the Friedlines, and I was talking to Susan. She was here, you guys saw her here with her kids a couple weeks ago, and she said, I really am compelled to do something that helps people out and gets the gospel to them. And she's like, I'm thinking something like a well, because you guys have done the wells, and I think I want to do a well in memory of Mark. And I was like, well, we happen to work with Healing Hands International, and Healing Hands International doesn't just drill wells. They drill wells, and they put evangelists on the ground at the well site. So they actually proactively teach the gospel to people, and so they send reports, not just of the people who receive water, but of the people who are receiving the gospel in those countries and at those well sites. And so that's their whole mission. And so she, of course, lit up like crazy. And so yesterday we were out at one of her son Jeb had a birthday or a graduation party. So we went out there, and I talked to her for a good bit, and she's like, I've already been talking to people, and she's like, I think I have the money pledged for that well already. And she's like, we're not just stopping at this well. She's like, I have plans, I have dreams, I have faith. And she's like, we're not going to stop and just do a little bit of work for the Lord and then say our job is done. And I was like, this is so cool that this small congregation literally services people with clean water, with the gospel, with all kinds of things. We support the Campbells and the mission work that they do. We are I want to say that we're the second largest church sponsor that the Campbells have, which I think is really impressive. Think about all the churches that they're connected to all over the place. And we're their second largest sponsor for the work that they do in Ecuador. And if you look at the reports, I hope you guys read the Operation Ecuador reports that we put back there every quarter. look at the amount of souls that are being saved and the medical missions and all that stuff. I just got an update from Julian in Limonade, Haiti, just a couple days ago. He sent videos, he sent pictures, and I told him I'd pass that on to the congregation. They're doing medical missions every single week in their congregation with the money that we just sent a few weeks ago. So it wasn't just about a motorcycle, and I told you guys, I'm like, Julian will stretch every single penny out of this. And he's going to help as many people as he possibly can with medicine and food. And so he's sending these updates, and with that money that we spent, he's doing a medical mission because they have, I think they have 2 nurses and a doctor that are members at the congregation. And so those church members are doing a medical clinic every single Sunday. And the cool thing is they're using that as an evangelistic tool because people are coming in from the community who are not members of the church. And Julian is studying the Bible with them, and so he sent an update of this was like 3 weeks ago. They had, my memory's so terrible at this point. It was either 4 or 6 baptisms like 3 weeks ago. And that was a direct result of that money that we sent. And so you look at, like, we can look at the attendance board and be like, oh my goodness, and look at the budget and you're like, like, we're so limited in our resources. That's such a humanistic mindset to have. Because you look at the big picture and what God's actually doing, we get to the grind, we do the hard work, and then God is just doing all this stuff in huge ways through this congregation. And so I think we have to shift our mentality and say, like, we're probably not ever going to be like an alliance church and have this massive building and this, this huge facility and, every seat packed and we have 2 services and like we're this, hip church that's just like the cool church that everybody wants to go to. Like, it's probably not a reality. And so that shouldn't be our focus. What should be our focus is if we understand what Sam's saying about, like, when we really glorify God, we just get to the grind. We just do the work, and there's no glamour in that. And when we understand that, when we comprehend that, we see lives being radically changed, and oftentimes, dare I say it, more lives being radically changed than what you see at some of the bigger churches that maybe aren't as focused on missions and evangelism because there's a high view of worship and a lower view of evangelism and outreach. So these are the things that Thom says. These are 10 things. Future work in church, 10 realities you might not know. Number 1, in-person worship gatherings will be more important. Churches should staff accordingly. This is kind of interesting. As a result of COVID, people are kind of tired of Zooming, online with each other. Like, while that's a good tool, it's a good resource, it cannot substitute in person. And so there's a shift to people craving in-person gathering. Number 2, the majority of churches in 5 years will have a non-church organization using their facilities on weekdays. And so he says, thus the future work of the church will not be in a church building for most churches for 5 to 6 days a week because their building's being used. It's being occupied by non-church, non-religious organizations. And he doesn't say why. I'm sure this is because of surveys that he put out. But my guess is, based on some of these other things, they're having a hard time paying bills, and so they're renting out the church space. And so if you step back and you look at that, like, some people would wring their hands and be like, oh no, like, they can't use their church buildings for 5 days a week because other organizations are using them, and worldly organizations. And I look at that and like, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? What do you think about that?
I thought it was a great way to get them to work with the church.
With the church, or to get your church members out there, where we belong. Yeah, I mean, there's a whole host of opportunities there. You have opportunities to say, hey, you guys are using our building. is there any other way that we can serve you besides for just giving space, physical space? Like, how else can we serve your organization or your people? Ministry opportunities and getting your church people out there. So I see this as a positive thing. It's a necessary thing because of finances, but it's also at the same time, it's a really good ministry opportunity. Number 3, small groups will be even more vital to the health of congregations. Churches should staff accordingly. People are being attracted to small groups. They crave relationship because that's all been dismantled because of COVID, because of the pandemic. Number 4, office workers will disappear. Virtual workers are replacing office workers. I think that's also a positive change. Part-time ministers will increasingly be the dominant work choice. Full-time ministers are disappearing rapidly. I've talked about this often, and it's ironic as a full-time minister talking about this, but we should be worked out of a full-time job. We've adopted the professional pastor model that says, oh, well, the sick need visited. We have a preacher who's on payroll to do that.
I got to throw the proverbial wrench in the monkey.
Yeah, do it.
I think we should have a professional, if you will, minister, but it ought to be an individual who is, this is going to sound really strange, actually professional evangelist, professional preacher, if you will, someone who is actually going out and spreading the word and not doing
The pastoral work.
the hospital business,
Yeah.
all the other stuff that ministers end up doing because the congregations, folks don't throw stones at me, were disaffected with it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what you're describing is the Acts 6 model that says, there's this distribution issue with the food. Right. Certain widows are being overlooked. They're hungry. They're not receiving their food. And so the issue is, you guys need to help with the distribution. We need all hands on deck, to which their response was, it would not, well, first, no, but then they said it would not be right for us to neglect the ministry of preaching and teaching in order to wait on tables. Diakoneo is the verb form of that, to deacon or to wait on tables. Therefore, select 7 men full of wisdom and the Holy Spirit, who they can then disperse people and distribute the food. And so they came back. They didn't question it. They didn't argue. They didn't say, "But you're the ministers." They came back and they said, "Okay, we choose," and they named the 7 people, and the food distribution went on. So yeah, I mean that's exactly the model that you're describing. The issue is an issue of budget, from what Thom says. Most churches cannot afford full-time ministers today. And again, there's nothing wrong with bivocational ministers. Paul was very much a bivocational. He was a tent maker by profession. In fact, I guess he wasn't necessarily a bivocational because I don't think he took money from the church. All of his money came from his tent-making business. Verse 6, we must be fully prepared for the dominance of bivocational. So there's that one that I just mentioned. Number 7, this new future of work will require more raising up of ministry staff within our churches. Discipleship, discipling people to minister. Again, that's a positive thing. I think we shouldn't view any of these as negatives. I think these are all positive changes for the church. Number 8, the enigma in the future of work in churches is the positions of student ministry and children's ministry. He said, we do not see a consistent pattern about the future of these ministry positions. If we begin to see a clear trend, we'll let you know. So in other words, focusing on, go figure, let's focus on young people and raise them up into mature Christians. And we just mentioned this. Who was I talking to the other day about, and this is, I'm not sharing, I always want to be careful to say this, like I'm not sharing anything confidential when I say this because people are very open about it. But Travis Moody, we're talking about Christina. Travis sat on the couch and played video games, and just had no drive because he never had a father in his life. And Christina, I think, did the absolute best that she could, but he just struggled to have a drive for things in life. Bill Riggs, going back to Bill. Bill, very quietly, and probably almost virtually no church member knew he was doing this. Bill said, I've got to help him get his license because without a license, he can't be a productive member of society. Without being a productive member of society, he can't raise a Christian family. He can't establish a home properly. And so he said, the most important thing that I can do in that young man's life is to help him get a license. And so Travis, at the age of 19, Bill said, Travis, I'm going to work with you. I'm going to help you get your license. The paperwork was an absolute nightmare because he didn't have a birth certificate. It was a complete nightmare. And Bill worked and worked and worked and worked and worked with him. And finally, after Bill would work all day at the factory, at the shop, in the office, he would go to Travis's house, he would pick him up, and he would take him out on back roads and teach him how to drive. This went on for, probably 2 years. It was not an easy process. And so fast forward to today, 3 weeks ago, I had lunch with Travis, and Travis said, I owe my life to that man. He said he never gave up on me. He's like, I would have given up on me. And he said, Bill never gave up on me. And so Travis now is only one of 2 people certified to carry a weapon inside the county jail. He's also a trauma, I forget what the title is, but it's a specific trauma response certified corrections officer. So when there's an attempted suicide, Travis is the one they call, not just at this county jail, but all over the state. And so because of his certifications that he keeps getting, Travis is really highly ranked in our county jail. That never would have happened if Bill hadn't done something as simple as to help him get his license. And I look at that and I'm like, we grind and we grind and we grind, and unfortunately Bill never lived to see where Travis is now. But that's what this is all about. You just grind and you just do the right thing, and you press forward even if you don't see the results of it. And we're so results focused that we get discouraged, and we're like, oh my goodness, I'm not making a difference. And if we look at this congregation, look at how many people we've lost in the last 7-8 years. There are days where it makes you want to crawl in a hole and just be like, I suck at life, But then you look at the bigger picture at what all God's doing through this congregation, and you're like, wait a second. We're helping more people now than we ever have, I would argue, in the church's history. God is doing huge things. And so, all of this has to work together, and we have to have a really good understanding of this. We're way out of time. You guys can read these. Unfortunately, I didn't get to our scriptures this week. So next week, we're going to jump in 2 Timothy chapters 2 and 3. There's some really cool stuff there that all ties this together. So just some food for thought. And I'm actually excited for where the church is headed generally in this nation. I think there's some really big things for. All right, thank you guys. We'll see you in a few minutes.